Okay, so welcome everyone to our December 2024 Kriya Yoga question and answer session. These sessions are available to students of the Kriya Yoga online ashram at kriya-yoga.teachable.com. So any people or students who take classes there, you get invites to this monthly online gathering. It's also available to supporters of the Kriya Yoga online Patreon community, patreon.com/Kriya Yoga. Now, today we have a theme, and that theme deals with divine purpose, the meaning of life, and how Kriya Yoga plays a role in that. So, before we get started, before we dig into these questions that have been sent to me, I'd like to take a moment, like all of us, to take a moment to just close our eyes and turn our attention within. And we're going to engage in a prayer practice of sorts, with the purpose of gaining the knowledge, the information, the guidance that we need for our current life situation and for our current place on the spiritual path. So when people come together for a similar purpose, that purpose tends to be empowered. The fields of consciousness of all of the people involved tend to amplify the experience. And so since we're all here in this Kriya Yoga question and answer session, what I'd like to do is get us all focused, all pointed in the same direction. Now, the theme of this Q&A seems to be around what is the purpose of life? How do I know my purpose in it? And also, what does it mean to be fully spiritually awake and clear? So that's what we're going to be looking at. So I'd like you to feel your body, sense the inner field of your body, feel the breath moving through the body, and become aware of that aspect of your being. And observe the mind, the thoughts, the ideas. Just be aware of the field of the mind. And feel the heart within the chest, as though you're feeling that essence of your being, which is most closely aligned with truth, spirit, the essence of what you are. And as you feel the body, as you're aware of the mind, as you sense the heart, just set the intention that during our time together, that what you want to know, what you want to explore, what you're open to is gaining the knowledge, the awareness that is important for your own life path and for your own spiritual path, around the theme of the importance of spiritual enlightenment, the purpose of life, the purpose of your life. Feel it for yourself, as though if there were an energy in your body, in your breath, in your heart, and in your mind, that it was responding to this, as if it was saying, yes, that's great. Let's explore this. I'm interested in it. And then remember, there are many other spiritual seekers in this collective group. And so imagine they're like lights all around you, and that you want that for them too. You're like, yeah, I would love to see and feel and experience them gaining insight, knowledge, intuition about these important topics, this important theme, and that you're happy for them. that we can all share in this exploration together. And we'll do a little mantra. So feel that in your body and your mind and in your heart. And then I'll recite a phrase and just recite it in your mind. Asato ma sadgamaya. Asato ma sadgamaya. Lead me from ignorance to truth. Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. Lead me from darkness to light. Mrityor amritam gamaya. Mrityor amritam gamaya. Lead me from death to immortality. Asato ma sadgamaya. Tamaso ma jyotir gamaya. Mrityor ma amritam gamaya. Lead me from ignorance to truth. Lead me from darkness to light. Lead me from death to immortality. Just feel those words, if they had vibration, if they had resonance, they had a feeling within you. Sense it in your heart and in your mind and in your body. Okay. When you're ready, take a breath. Feel the body full as though the chest is expanding. Feel the torso full, free as you exhale, grounded deep within your being, within your body. Okay. So I'm going to go through these questions. I'm going to tell you what they are first, and then we'll address them to the best of my ability. So the first question refers to the class that is in the Kriya Yoga Discipleship Course on the Kriya Yoga Online Ashram, Finding Your Divine Purpose. So you said that your divine purpose was revealed after persistent effort on your part. How did you know that your revealed purpose came from a source outside your own mind? When I have received answers to questions that I've asked, the answers seem to have just popped into my head and have tended to be cryptic, short, and seem like something I would have never said or thought. Can you tell me what your experience has been and how you determined that the answer came from the divine? So that's question number one. Question number two, what is your understanding on the purpose of life? Is enlightenment the purpose of life? If I set it as a goal, it creates tension, which is one more obstacle that I already have. The sun just is and shines. Does it have a purpose in its own existence besides to just be or to shine? Maybe the purpose of our lives is to go beyond all purposes. Number three, in my book, Ryan's book, Continuing the Lineage of Enlightenment, Kriya Yoga Continuing Lineage of Enlightenment, on page 91, chapter 2, in the context of the sutra that says, the manifested world only exists for the experience and emancipation of consciousness. How does Kriya Yoga practice help to realize and embody this essential knowledge? Number four, I've been contemplating what it means to be fully awake. How does one know what the end goal is? What is fully awake? So all these questions came at once or over the course of a few days. And as I was looking at them, I was realizing there's certainly a theme there. Now, we do have one other question that was sent to me, which I'm still going to answer, even though it's not quite in the theme. And it deals with alternate nostril breathing and visualizing energy flows within your practice. So I'm going to reserve that to the end. So we're going to go through each of these questions. And these are very involved questions. So this could take a while. As we go, if if you have something you need clarified, please type it into the chat box. So we want to make sure that we've got some good interaction here. Let's get started. All right. So first, let's talk about the question about divine purpose. And the questioner said, in your Finding Your Divine Purpose class, you said that your divine purpose was revealed after persistent effort on your part. How did you know that your revealed purpose came from a source outside your own mind? When I have received answers to questions that I've asked, the answers seem to have just popped into my head and have tended to be cryptic, short, and seem like something I would have never said or thought. Can you tell me what your experience has been and how you determined the answer came from the divine? Okay, excellent question. And first of all, I want to say that my experience of that has changed through time. So I want to take a moment to discuss what was it like when I was just figuring it out, and then what it's like once the momentum got rolling. So, like everyone, like most people, many people, you're born into a world and there's lots of opportunities, lots of options. You have your own interests, ideas. Your parents have their own interests and ideas. Your grandparents have their own interests and ideas. Society has its own interests and ideas. So there's all this possibility. And some people, when they become an adult or they're a young adult, they just have a flow of momentum going in a certain direction, a confluence. The parents are supportive of what they want to do. Society says, yes, that's a great idea. You're on that wavelength. You go in that direction. It works out. That's usually easier. It's an easier start. But not everyone has that. And many people, they're subject to the scattered influences, not only of the people around them in society, but also of their own mind. I mean, most of us are born with not a whole lot of confluence in our mind. And so what you have to do is to start building that confluence, start building a direction of where you want to go. And the first step for me was simply wondering, well, what would I want to do? Or what is important for me? Or what is necessary in this experience? And when I started contemplating this, I was not thinking on divine cosmic levels. I was thinking more practically. And things came to mind. I was interested in music. That was a first interest of mine, but that wasn't really worthwhile for me for a few reasons. I absolutely value musicians and what they do, but it wasn't, I had a sense that wasn't quite it. It was just a knowing. Mainly it was because I don't like staying up late and doing lots of drugs. And most of the musicians I knew, they were night owls. They wasted a lot of money on things that were not useful. But that was a whole other thing. I liked going to bed early. I liked getting up early. I liked a stable schedule. So my life preference sort of precluded me from many of those things. And I also did not come from a society or a family that knew how to maybe turn me into a concert violinist, because clearly in those situations, you don't have these other distractions. At least I hope not. I don't know. I'm just guessing. So I knew I was interested in psychological things. I knew I was interested in philosophy. I knew I was interested in alternative ways of seeing things. So I went to college for psychology and philosophy. And, but that wasn't quite it either. But you see, I was moving in the right direction. I was moving in the direction, I was exploring something. It wasn't bringing me complete satisfaction, but I knew there was something missing, but I kept looking and I kept having the sense that it was possible. So when it comes to this idea, first of all, of learning to catch on to your divine purpose or what your purpose is, the first step is often feeling and admitting that it is possible for you to find it and know it. Because so many people go through life looking and just feeling like they can't know it or it's impossible. And so they never do. So a first step is doing whatever mental gymnastics or emotional gymnastics you need to do to sit down and recognize it is absolutely possible for me to know and feel an important purpose. Okay. Now, the question about how did you know that it came from outside your own mind? Well, I don't know because I didn't really, that wasn't a question of mine. I wasn't imagining that there was something outside of me that was going to tell me something. I was kind of looking and just trying to figure it out. And so, um, another step in that movement could be acknowledging that you're part of a whole and that you can get responses through an insight in your own mind. Something can just pop up and say, why don't you explore this? Maybe that is your own mind, but that is the whole using the mind of you to kind of point you in a direction. Sometimes it's a knowing, it's just a sensation, it's a feeling of what is right. And in the beginning, as I mentioned, when you talk about the beginning, I didn't make good choices every step I went. I had an idea, I had an intuition, and maybe that intuition was a little blurry, uh, but I followed it to the best of my ability, and maybe I made a wrong step. But then I'd back up and I'd ask again, and I'd be curious, and I'd take another step, and eventually that one would be right, and I'd follow it. So in the beginning, you make a lot of mistakes, but that's part of the process too. And how do you know you're moving in the right direction? You know you're moving in the right direction when there is an inner sense that, I don't understand it all. And I'm not sure this is going to be the thing that gives me ultimate fulfillment, but this is what I know. This is the best that I've got. You just have to follow it. And I did that for several years. And what happened? Well, I went to college for psychology and philosophy. I didn't have a sense that I really wanted to participate in that field at that time. So then I knew there was more to well-being than what I had learned in these courses. So I became a massage therapist and a craniosacral therapist. Well, that was interesting for a while. It helped people, but I also felt that there was something more to that. So I began studying Vedic astrology, and it kind of took me back to the psychological roots a little bit. I stayed there for a while, and all the while I'm exploring meditation for myself, for others. I'm learning how to teach. I'm observing my teacher, Mr. Davis, Roy Eugene Davis. I'm seeing what he does. I'm patterning my life after him. I do a few things, they don't work. I do a few things, they do work. And it's like you're just trying and you're just looking. And so as I was exploring my own purpose, there were not words on high channeling down into my skull, vibrating, saying, thou shalt do this. It was just a trust in a process of growth. And we have to remember that in the beginning, what you have to have is a capacity to believe that you do have that possibility of growth and exploration and finding what you're looking for. If you don't have the faith that it is possible, that's your first step that you have to work on. And for me, because I was a very pessimistic and skeptical person in many ways, really part of that for me really early on was having affirmations where I would specifically sit and tell myself this is possible, despite, to the contrary, all the psychological complexes and emotional mental baggage that I had to really sit down and just, this is possible. And Mr. Davis would often say, don't affirm anything you don't want to be true for yourself. And I find that to be absolutely one of the most important pieces of information I've ever gotten. You, part of the Kriya Yoga path, part of any spiritual path, any authentic enlightenment path, even philosophical path, is starting to look at what am I carrying around in regards to my belief systems and how I see myself and what I think is possible for me. And so at first, it might not be having divine revelation about what your purpose is. It might be coming to terms with what's going on in your head. And you have to be willing to change what is going on in your head. So many people, so many younger people who go to college and so on, they go on to get higher degrees, higher education. Is it because they're really interested in what they're studying, or is it because they're afraid of moving into an adult stage of life? They want to keep that flexible schedule. They want to not have to really answer to a boss so much, and they can sometimes explain it away by saying, "Oh, well, I'm studying for something higher." But then you talk to them and they're miserable. It's because they're avoiding things. So oftentimes when we're exploring our divine purpose, we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to move out of a comfort zone to try new things. And that's what you have to do in the very beginning. Now, later on, as time passed, I began to see how trusting in the process was working. um, I began to see that, yes, I'm making mistakes. And sometimes I go down the complete wrong path for a little while. But then if I go down that path long enough, I really start to feel like, this isn't the right way. And I can fight it. And I can say, yes, but I committed to this. And you keep going until eventually there comes a tipping point where you just can't go any further. And you have to back up. And that's part of the learning experience too. And so that became less and less, because what happened was, as I sat down and as I contemplated what to do, what to study, how to set up a class for people to come to, and so on, or retreats or situations that brought you here today, I would just contemplate it. And I would ask, well, what's worked in the past? And I would kind of scroll through my options. And then the one that felt like it was alive, the one that felt like, oh, that's really, yeah, that feels more like there's a magnetic pull towards it. So this brings up another aspect of the whole process, which is why it's good that you're meditators, is that in order to really move in a direction like that, you have to be sensitive enough to feel the quality of lightness and support that is real, rather than your own wishful thinking. Because human capacity for denial and imagining things should be a certain way is unbelievable. And I'm saying that from experience. But when you can back up and you can learn to, even if it's the one that your mind wouldn't agree with, that your mind is like, oh, hell no, I don't want to do that. But if you can kind of let go of your attachment to the commentary of the mind, and you can feel that kind of sense and you follow it, because it takes faith again, that is another important facet of figuring out and following your divine purpose. Some people who see what I do, and they want to do it too, they have an idea of what it's like. And they don't realize that there were many years when I would set up workshops, classes, and no one would show up. It would just be me sitting there by myself. But I didn't get frustrated, because I knew I had that sense of knowing. So what did I do? Well, for the duration of the workshop, I just sat there and meditated by myself. And then I kind of wondered, well, what could I have done differently? And then I continued. And that was a long time. Some people come and they see what's going on. They come to the retreats and the retreats are full, or they come to online events, or they try to get into classes and they're full, and they think, oh, that is just something that Ryan experienced as divine grace, and it's always been this way. Well, yeah, is it divine grace? Sure. But has it always been that way? No. There were many times when I was sat by myself and no one cared about Kriya Yoga. No one showed up to anything that I did. But it was important to me. And since it was important to me, I did other things to support that process. So one more thing I want to say about that is this, that just because you're not getting paid for your divine purpose, just because no one is flocking to take advantage of whatever you have to offer, it doesn't mean you're not fulfilling your divine purpose. It just might mean at that time, that's not appropriate for you. So as I continued to teach Kriya Yoga, and few people would come, or no one would come, or a few more people would come, well, I worked as a landscaper for a bit. I worked as a Vedic astrologer, a massage therapist, but for the purpose of supporting what I knew the inner purpose was of teaching this philosophy and these techniques. And because of that, the actual supportive things that I did became empowered to that purpose. Okay. Now, one final thing I'll say about this question before we move on to the next one. Now, what is my sense of how I determine if answers come from the divine or not? Well, again, I'm not sitting for hours in meditation waiting for a radiant light to infuse the room, and an angel to show up and say, go this way, Ryan, talk to this person. Now it's more just a sense of Remember how I talked about that sense of being pulled in a direction? Now it's just everything that arises in my mind, since I've practiced it so much, immediately it's as if there's a little needle in my heart. And whereas before I'd doubt it and it'd flutter around and things, well, now I can just take a moment and breathe and look at the landscape of what's available, and then it'll just goes that way. And I follow it. And sometimes I'm really surprised at what it says I should do, but I follow it. And it contributes to the path of purpose in the process. And there's another question here that we'll speak to that I'll speak more about this. Even recently in my life, a situation has arisen that I wasn't planning on. And I'm actually really surprised that I'm considering it. And pretty much I've already made the decision to do it. And even though it's slightly out of character for ways I've thought and been over the last 20 years, that pull, that compass direction just feels light and open, like, yeah, that's the way to go. And so I'm just going to do it. We'll see what happens. And that's a big thing, but it's true for smaller experiences too. So to answer the question, it's a process, finding your divine purpose, knowing that the divine is revealing it to you. From my experience, I don't imagine the divine as something separate from me or outside of me. I imagine, I feel, I sense that information that comes to me, feelings that I have, responses within my field of being, that all of that is part of the guide. And I listen to it and I pay attention to it. And if you can make sense of that and start working into that, you'll probably have the same experience. But it takes a long time. At least for me, it did. But I wanted it. Like, it was very important to me. So if it's very important to you, then you'll more easily grow into this kind of process. Okay, next question. Oh, what? Here's a question from you in the chat box. So I want to speak to that, since I want to stick with what we're doing here. Letting go versus thinking it through. So I suppose feeling versus rational thought. So after a few years of meditation, I've noticed my mind goes blank more often, allowing me to ride a wave of emptiness and letting go for a few seconds. However, in doing so, I feel like I'm also letting go of my own issues. Can I trust that this strong momentum of letting go will eventually resolve my issues, or should I force myself to think them through and find a solution? It's a good question. I use both. So, for example, the thing that I was exploring recently, I had the intuition to go in that direction, but I absolutely took a lot of time to practically work out, well, how could that be? So I do feel that it's important to have the letting go, but once the intuition, the support feeling is there, then I absolutely stop and figure it out. So I pay attention to the specificity of action required to make that thing happen. And I don't just hope it's going to happen or trust that it's just going to work out, because I know that there are certain steps that you have to take for success in any endeavor. You know, if I'm making a cake, great, let's have a cake. Well, now I know I have to get up and go get the ingredients and put them together in a way and bake them, right? So it's similar, but that's a good question. Okay, next one on the list here. So what is your understanding on the purpose of life? So previously we talked about sort of how to find our own purpose. But what is your understanding on the purpose of life? Is it enlightenment? If I set that goal, it creates tension, which is one more obstacle that I already have. The sun just shines and is. Does it have a purpose in its own existence besides just to be or shine? Maybe the purpose of our lives is to go beyond all purposes. Okay, first of all, what I need to say is that philosophers have been wondering this probably since philosophy was invented. If you listen to a lot of podcasts or read books on philosophers, you probably won't ever really find the answer, because I don't think any of them have definitively come up with that answer. So I appreciate your belief in me that maybe I could, but I don't claim to be able to do that either. However, what I would say is this: yogis, mystics, spiritual teachers, people that I have adored and looked up to, have said that the purpose of life is enlightenment. That makes sense to me. And also, by paying attention to what they have taught and seeing how it works out in practice, when you actually give it enough time to notice that, they've been right. From my perspective, if the sages, the saints, the mystics say this is the purpose, and I've engaged their practices and I've seen how they work, and they have worked, then I'm going to affirm that yes, the purpose of life is enlightenment. Now, again, this is something that philosophy professors have probably spent courses and theses and years of study and lives, trying to explain these things. So we'll do our best with the time that we have. But my experience has been that everything contributes to illumination of our spirit. And remember, I'm using the words the best I can. So these metaphors, these analogies might not be technically accurate, but I'm just trying to get a point across. Yogananda, he'd said that the ultimate goal of life is to experience direct communion with God through meditation and devotion. So Yogananda said, the goal of life is to experience direct communion with God through meditation and devotion. He also said happiness and fulfillment can't be found in external achievements or material possessions, but only in spiritual awakening. Then he said, life's challenges and experiences serve as a lesson to grow spiritually and deepen one's understandings of divine truths. All right. So these are things that Yogananda had indicated. These aren't direct quotes. They're things he's indicated. And I find that to be absolutely true. Okay. Does my stepdaughter find this to be true? No. Does your great aunt or uncle, did they find that to be true? No. There are people out there that don't find this to be true. So does that mean it's wrong? No, it doesn't mean it's wrong. The reason I'm bringing this up is because even though that is the ultimate goal, the purpose of life, not everyone is at a place in the field of consciousness where that is either necessary to know or it really doesn't need to matter right now. And you can look at that if you look at like the lifetime of a human. Is it important for a human adult to know how to take care of themselves, to be of service to the world, and to be a mature, compassionate, healthy-minded adult? Okay, well, yes, when they're adult, that's true. Is that really necessary? Would you start talking to a 3 or 4-year-old? Would you expect a 3 or 4-year-old to know and understand what is actually required for an adult to do that? I hope not. I mean, it might be nice to give them some ideas, but I'm not a parent, so I've never had kids, so I don't really know. But there's different that the youngster is going to become an adult eventually, and so yes, they're going to see the importance of that. Everything that they're doing, how they're learning to interact with the world, they're developing balance, they're developing interest and curiosity, they're putting things in their mouth that they shouldn't so that their immune system gets stronger, so that their body can actually live for a long enough time to become an adult. Everything that they're doing is actually part of the process of becoming that healthy-minded adult. So the reason I'm telling you this is that if the people that you see don't think this is important, that's all right. Because where they are and what they're doing is still leading in that direction. It's just that they haven't reached the experience yet where it clicks and it dawns on them, oh, this is why I've been doing all of that. Sri Yukteswar, let's see, many of you can see that icon back there. That was an icon that a student made for me who's a professional iconographer, maybe that's the name. Beautiful, but it's the cover. It's the cover of this book, Understanding the Holy Science. And what I wanted to point out was this, the Sanskrit here, which is in that icon. This is the final sutra in Sri Yukteswar's The Holy Science. And the reason I put it on in the icon when we were designing it, and I think it's so important, is because it encapsulates what we're doing. The translation of that, I'll do my best to make it make sense. The translation of the final verse of chapter 4 of the Holy Science is, once one gains the knowledge of creation, once one gains the knowledge of life and how life is sustained, and once one gains the experience and knowledge of dissolution, how it goes away, then you go beyond Maya or illusion, and you eventually see the supreme self. You see the eternal self, right? And so the whole purpose of Sri Yukteswar's Holy Science and his emphasis on Kriya Yoga is growing into the knowledge and the understanding of truly, fully what you are, how you come into being, how spirit manifested all of this, what it's like to experience life, and then what happens when all of that dissolves, and what remains then is spirit. And in Sri Yukteswar's Holy Science, he describes stages of I guess maybe we'll say the field of consciousness. And so right now you're a human, which means you're at a particular stage in this purpose. And one of the first stages is simply rocks, materials, existence, physical, concrete experience. And then the capacity for plants come into being. And then animals, the ability to actually move around, do things, check things out, procreate. Once all of that happens, it persists until the human being with a reason, the frontal lobes of the brain and how our brain is developed, the field of consciousness develops the capacity to look around and name things and interact in the world beyond just animalistic impulses. Well, that's where we are. But Sri Yukteswar goes on to say that there's also beyond this the realm of the devas, and I translate as the angelic realm. And again, my sense of that is not the standard church version of what you think an angel or a god or a deva is. It's a being of light, a being of knowledge. And then even beyond that is the sannyasin stage. Now, if you're an animal, do you really need to be worried about flowing your awareness into becoming a being of light? No, you're meant to have the experience of being an animal. And then as the field of consciousness evolves, the human capacity comes into play. And then once you become a human, you see there are a lot of humans running around that are really still just animals. You know them, I know them. But they've moved into a human form of consciousness, field of consciousness. And in time, the more experiences they have as a human, they will start to recognize their capacity to think, to reason, to love, to have compassion, to put aside their own petty animalistic desires for the greater good of the whole. And as that happens, eventually one day they discover meditation, or they discover a spiritual path, and they discover, oh, all of that sex, all of that food, all of that media entertainment and stimulation that I've been trying to satisfy myself with, it doesn't compare at all to this inner realm of light within me. And the moment that happens, there's a glimpse of the possibility of the angelic, or being a being of light, reaching that experience. And you might want to read this book if you're interested in what I'm talking about here. Understanding the Holy Science, a theoretical and experiential study guide to Sri Yukteswar's Kriya Yoga practice. We have maybe another hour, and this is 500 pages. So you can expand upon what we're talking about. But so anyway, this experience is moving in that direction. Now, you can ask questions about, well, the sun just shines. Yes, it does. But in yogic philosophy, there is a profound statement, and this is actually part of the next question that someone's asked about the Yoga Sutras, is that there's the statement that nature, and by nature, I mean everything that exists, the sun, the water, your body, everything exists solely for the illumination of spirit. Okay. It exists solely for the illumination of spirit. Now, when I was in certain traumatic experiences, or I was overcome with mental and emotional and psychological difficulties, if you would have come up to me and said, everything that you're experiencing is solely for the illumination of spirit, how do you think I would have responded to that? How would anyone respond to being in the throes of trauma and grief and difficulty? And someone says, well, it's all for God's higher purpose. All right, well, if you were raised in a certain culture, you might be able to step back and say, hallelujah, praise the Lord, I get it. But that's not how I was raised. So I did not immediately go that way. And I think many people might not necessarily respond in that same manner. However, as we develop and as we continue engaging our spiritual path, as we continue engaging our divine purpose, those things become more understandable, which means when something does roll through your life that would steamroll you before, you're able to step back and say, well, so far, everything that I have experienced has led me to greater clarity in some way, if I've taken the time to reflect upon it, or it's led me within, or it's broken my attachments to the things that I don't need to be attached to. Then you're able to maintain that level of light, clarity, peace, sattva. In the Kriya Yoga online Patreon community, we've just finished up the sixth month of the Primordial Powers of Creation, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas class. It could be very helpful for you to go and listen to that class because it explains sort of how creation comes into being. It's a great adjunct to the holy science. But to get back to the point here, enlightenment is the purpose of life. And it might be that someone who is a single mom raising 3 kids all by herself, and she doesn't have time to meditate. She doesn't have time to consider the Yoga Sutras, the Bhagavad Gita. Does that mean that she's still not engaged in a life of enlightenment? No, that's not what it means. It means that right now where she is, life is providing her experiences which will make it much. It will allow her to appreciate this path of enlightenment when the switch finally clicks, when the opportunity finally arises, and those karmas of strain and isolation, once those karmas have exhausted themselves, then they can take a breath and feel and see that. So the sun shines for your illumination. The rain falls so that you can have food, so that you can have a body, so that plants can grow, so that you can have a body, so that you can focus your awareness within. All of your friends are there for your illumination. Some of them are there to show you what it's like to have integrity and to be strong in sattva and light. And some of your friends are there to show you don't need to be doing those things that they're doing. If you start looking at everything in that way, and trusting that experience, you'll find that to be true. And this also goes back to what I had said previously about the first question. You have to acknowledge that this is a possibility. You have to acknowledge that even if you don't believe it, that it is a possibility. And if you do, you'll start to see the possibility, and then you'll be able to grow into that possibility. So no, I don't agree that the purpose of life is to go beyond all purposes. Eventually, way down the line, maybe. But what many people do is they try to jump way down the line before they've actually gone through the experiences that would allow them to fully be just present. Because as Sri Yukteswar said, with that quote from the Holy Science, you have to have knowledge. You have to be conscious of it. Um, if you haven't consciously grown through the experience, you don't know what to do, which means that even if you catch a glimpse of just pure being, you don't know how to stabilize it. You don't know how to flow your awareness into it. Personally, I really appreciated having a teacher like Roy Jean Davis, because he he actually had to interact with life. He was married multiple times. Um, he he was not given everything. He had to work for it. His illumination didn't just happen one day. It was a process of continual practice, study, surrender, practice, study, activity. And that's probably why I got him as a teacher, because for me that is more important, because it means that he's been through it. So he knows how to guide us, or me, or whoever his students were, into the experience, because he had to work for it. I'm a very I prefer to learn from people who had to go through a struggle. And if you've ever heard me complain about music teachers, I don't know if you have or not, but there are amazing musicians out there that have been playing music since they were 3 years old, and they're just savants and virtuosos. And I used to look up to some of those. But then eventually I wanted to learn how to play like them. And so I reached out to them for lessons, and they're terrible teachers. All they say is, well, this is what you do. And they just do what they do and expect you to just do it. And that's terrible. Well, maybe some people can get it. But for me, I need someone who understands, okay, this is where they are in the struggle. So let's just get them to focus on this, and we'll build upon that. So we have to remember that this whole process is a building process. But again, one of the first things you have to have is the faith, the capacity, the belief, the feeling that it is possible to know this truth, and that you are willing to do whatever it takes to overcome the truth. This question said, if I set the goal of my purpose of life as being enlightenment, it creates a tension. Yes, it does. Why do you get tense when someone tells you that the purpose of your life is to grow, to change, to explore, to know something you've not known before? Well, some people just thrive on that, but most people struggle. So if there is a tension that comes when you set a goal, I want to know this. Well, what's happening? All of your psychological complexes are roaring. It's like in the Bhagavad Gita. At the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita, there's two sides of this field, this war. One side is the side with like the chakras, and they blow their horns, and you become enlightened and inspired, and you want to move forward, and you want to learn, you want to grow, you want to fight. But on the other side are all the self-serving tendencies like laziness, anger, egotism, and so on. And if you've noticed this, I mean, I've noticed it, anytime you want to change or achieve something new in the beginning, if there's resistance to it, it's going to roar right at the moment that you get a moment that you're able to move forward. And then you have a choice. You can give in to it, or you can say, nope, I'm powering through, or whatever you need to do. I don't necessarily recommend abusing yourself by powering through all the time, but sometimes you have to. So if tension arises when you set a goal, and we'll say the goal of enlightenment, well, that's good, because what it's telling you, it's a message, it's information. You say, I want to be enlightened. These sages say, these mystics say, the purpose of life is to be enlightened. I want that. Well, as soon as you say, I want that, and the tension arises, and if you can take time to look at that tension and say, well, what's going on here? Why don't I want to? What's stopping me? What is this tension? What is holding me back? And for that, I would recommend that you find an internal family systems counselor, IFS, to figure out what that part of you is that is holding you down. And IFS is great, because even though there is a hole, well, sometimes there are like warring parts of you. I was just dealing with this last week or so. I went inside and I was kind of trying to access this deeper state of consciousness. And I was fascinated because it was as though there was one part that was yelling, no, don't do that. And there was another part that was saying, yeah, but I want to. And whereas before I would just ignore those things and try to plow over them, I stopped and I treated them as though they were parts of myself. I said, what are you yelling about? And I didn't mean it in a, what are you yelling about, stupid? It was serious. What's the deal here? Why are you upset? And I explored that in my mind and my consciousness. And I looked at the other part. Well, why do you want to go in this direction? And what happened was, it was as if I had a conversation within myself and I learned the reasons. And once I learned those reasons, there was a mutual understanding between these two parts. And then there was a sense of, okay, now you can go forward. All right. So anytime you're trying to accomplish something practical, starting a business, being a nicer person, becoming enlightened, and resistance arises, tension arises, then that's saying your path right now is to look at that, to explore that, to work it out and find help if you need it. And if you learn how to do that, everything that arises within your life, within your consciousness, deep within, actually feels and looks like an opportunity for growth, and it's enjoyable. You look forward to it, even if it's painful, even if you really have to do some deep digging. You know that, spending 30 hours digging a hole straight down, your back is going to be broke, you're going to be dirty, you're going to hurt. But once you get to the bottom, that hole's going to feel so much better. So the answer to the question, is the purpose of life enlightenment? Yes. Next question. Okay, so this is kind of a follow-up. Let me go to the chat box, make sure I'm not missing anything that you're talking about. So once again, we have the question, what are the powers we receive from the practice of Kriya Yoga? Well, I addressed that in the last Q&A. I think you asked it then too. The powers you receive are the powers of intuition, insight, compassion, and enlightenment. Okay. I want to apply for the advanced Kriya Yoga course. All right. So we're doing an advanced Kriya Yoga course now. But one of the requirements is to meditate 90 minutes every day. I do think that I can meditate for that long in terms of my ability to meditate, but with my life circumstances, job, commute, etc., I'm not entirely sure. Should I still apply this year, or maybe could do it next year? We're a little off track, but I'll answer that question. If you've gone and you've read the requirements for the advanced Kriya Yoga course, and it seems like you have, and it feels like it's possible for you, go ahead and apply. I haven't reviewed the applications yet, but I'm going to be doing that in the next couple of days. But if you're really certain that job, life circumstances, and so on would get in the way, I would hold off, because it might mean that part of what you need to do now is just work towards the 90 minutes, keep doing what you're doing, because you're going to keep deriving benefit from that. But you might need to, again, stop and look at, what do I need to adjust here so that I actually have that time in a non-stressful way? Because you don't want your meditation practice or your Kriya Yoga practice to be just one more stressful thing you have to cram into your life. That takes time. It's not always easy, but look in that direction and see what you can do. Okay, next question. Don't want to skip it. Okay. So this question is from this book, Kriya Yoga, Continuing the Lineage of Enlightenment, page 91. 91. Let's see, I keep points of inspiration everywhere. We have an Undamaya Ma in my book. Just to keep me focused, keep me engaged, knowing what is important. Chapter 2, Sutra 21. Okay, so this is the sutra we were talking about earlier, this very profound statement. The seeable, meaning anything that can be seen, nature, experience, is only for the purpose of the seer, which you are, spirit. And in Samkhya philosophy, which is what this is based on, there's a statement that says, essentially, nature, everything that you can experience, exists solely for the illumination of Purusha, self, spirit. I'm loosely making some very loose translations here. So if we have any Sanskrit scholars or experts, cut me a break. So the seeable is only for the purpose of the seer. In the context of the sutra that says, the manifested world only exists for the experience and emancipation of consciousness, how does Kriya Yoga practice help to realize and embody this essential knowledge? Okay. See chapter 4 of this book, An Essential Guide to Kriya Yoga Practice. I feel like I'm doing an infomercial on Kriya Yoga today with all of these books, but, fortunately, I've had lots of years and time to write this stuff out for you. So take advantage of it. But to answer the question, read chapter 4 in An Essential Guide to Kriya Yoga Practice. That's the most important thing. But what Kriya Yoga does, for those of you who haven't read the book, it works on a few different levels. The first level is a very practical level, and that is this. Spirit, Purusha, your infinite field of being, or your infinite consciousness, better way of stating it, is not defined by anything. Not defined by anything. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that when you practice the yamas and niyamas, and what are the yamas and niyamas? Harmlessness, truthfulness, non-hoarding, non-stealing, conserving your vital forces, and so on. Purity, contentment. This is called the great vow that a yogi takes. And the first stages of yoga practice are the yamas and niyamas. That's stage 1 and 2, yama and niyama. What does that do for you as a Kriya yogi? That begins the process of getting you aligned with that truth, of getting you aligned with the essence of your nature. And how does it do that? Well, just take a moment and consider, why do you hoard things? Why do you steal? Because you think something outside of you is required to make you happy or to make you fulfilled. Well, if yoga says, don't hoard things, don't steal, and you live from that and you follow that, you are immediately affirming the truth of your nature, that you don't have to pull things into you. You don't have to take things from others in order to be fulfilled. Truth. Why is truth? And what's interesting about truth is that truth is a restraint. Some of you might find this interesting, but we have the yamas and niyamas. The yamas are the things we don't do. The niyamas are the things we do. The niyamas are things like practicing purity, practicing contentment, engaging your spiritual practice, tapas, studying. Those are things you do as a Kriya yogi and as a spiritual aspirant seeker. But truth is in the yamas, the restraints. That's odd, isn't it? I think it's odd. Well, truth, you don't have to do anything for truth to exist. So all you have to do is essentially kind of not lie, not be engaged in things which don't have integrity. So that's why, in a way, truth is a restraint, not necessarily a doing, right? Which is really fascinating. If you take time to contemplate that, and I'd really encourage you to do that deeply, contemplate it deeply. How can that work in your life? How can that be true in your life? But anyway, you see, if you contemplate the yamas and niyamas and you live by them, you are every moment that the opportunity arises affirming your nature as infinite spirit, not defined by anything. Now, that's not experiencing shafts of light shooting through your sixth chakra, and that's not having ridiculous out-of-body experiences of oneness with everything, but it's important. Because if you know that, if you live that, if you feel that, it makes it possible for you to actually experience what you are, and it allows you to experience the importance of something like the enlightenment path. So from the very beginning, even if all you are doing is the yamas and niyamas and you're doing them 100% or even 98%, you are already creating a structure within the field of your consciousness which is prepared and able to recognize what you are as infinite spirit, not defined by anything. So that's level one. And all of us need to continuously do that. So it's not level one, then you go to level 7. You need to keep doing level 1. But then beyond that, and this is what we go into in Essential Guide to Kriya Yoga Practice in Chapter 4, is that the meditation techniques, chanting through the chakras, circulating life force through the spinal pathway, all of these things are they are pooling, they are redirecting what you're looking at from outside of you, all the things that are transient and change, to flowing it inward to the source of spirit. Now, there is a progression, meaning you don't just flow it in and all of a sudden, bam, there it is. There's a progression. So for people who are scattered, confused, unable to sit still, the first part of that progression is to just sit down, close your eyes. The moment you close your eyes, the moment you sit down and feel your body, all of this stuff all around you, it's not being processed. I mean, you're not aware of it as much as if you're like looking at it, engaged in it. So just the act of sitting still and closing your eyes is a step inward. Once you get that under control, then you learn to start feeling deeply into your body and into the field of prana, of life force within your body. And when you start to feel that, you are no longer necessarily aware of all the changing phenomena of your emotions and psychology and mind and so on. And you keep going until eventually you feel subtler fields of life. And you keep going until you feel subtler fields of consciousness. And each step is a movement more fully inward. And the process of Kriya Yoga is to keep doing that, keep building up that momentum until it, in a way, breaks through into the field of pure being, infinite spirit. You can call it God, divinity, whatever you want. Well, we should be a little more precise than that, but just for this exploration, call it whatever you want. Then you have that experience of the seer. And then you are able to sense that everything that has happened, everything that you've gone through has been solely for this process of turning within. And when you do Kriya Pranayama, you're circulating life force through the spine. Well, every time you do that correctly and with intention and feeling, you are withdrawing life force, withdrawing your attention out from the nerves, out from the organs that sense things, inward into the spinal pathway, and inward into the sushumna, and inward into the subtle energy channels. And over years, that momentum builds up until it can just stay there and it can flow in there. And you're good at it. And then you surrender into the process in the way that, again, using the idea of music, first you learn scales, then you learn chords, then you learn theory. Okay, G, C, D are chords in these kinds of songs. And then you learn this and that. And eventually you can improvise. And sometimes when you're improvising, you're still thinking about it. But eventually, when you become a master musician, when you're improvising and these beautiful solos and melodies are coming out of you, you're not thinking about it at all. You're just there. Well, it's the same thing we're doing with the Kriya Yoga practice. There is a process of doing, of directing, of thinking, of analyzing until eventually mastery occurs. And then it occurs of its own accord. And in a way, that's when you start to experience true devotion to God, Ishvara, Pranidhana, and surrender, and so on. But that's way down the line. But that's how spiritual practice embodies this essential knowledge that what we see, nature, exists solely for the illumination of the seer. All of that cumulative practice, effort, meditation, practicing the yamas and niyamas, all that cumulative experience reveals this to you. So that's why you do it for a long period of time. Okay. Okay. One question about Kriya Pranayama, and I'll move on to our final question within this theme. And that theme being, what does it mean to be fully awake? What is the end goal? I feel like we've touched upon it a good bit, but it'll be worth exploring again. So sometimes I feel a rocking side to side during Kriya Pranayama. Is this the prana? It's an internal feeling, maybe a slight outward rocking, but mostly an internal feeling. When you start to direct your awareness within, you can become aware of many different things. Sometimes, yes, it is a movement of life force through the body. Sometimes you sway or you feel your body move back and forth and so on. There's all kinds of things you can feel, really. I remember one interesting experience I had when we were in Ireland for the Kriya Yoga retreat with David McGraw. He was leading the meditation. I was sitting up there with him, and I was listening to him. But then all of a sudden, there was a sense of as if there was a field of a force field within my body and a force field without my body. And one of those fields was rotating this way and spiraling inward, and the other one was like rotating around it. It just absolutely sucked my attention inward. And later on, I learned what it was. But that's an example of those kinds of things happening. So you can have all kinds of experiences. But also when you meditate, those of you who are body workers and so on, when a person starts to relax, any kind of tension patterns within the body can begin to manifest. Because you walk through life and you think, oh, I'm relaxed and so on, but your body has to have tension to hold itself together, to keep yourself doing things right. And so sometimes the deeper you go into meditation, the more you relax, these tension patterns, if they're chronic because of how you work or how you sleep or how you move, like the Alexander technique can be good for figuring these things out, they'll start to release. And sometimes those releases are like, a quick snapping of the body, or sometimes they're just a slow, repetitive movement where the muscle or the connective tissue is kind of unwinding itself. So there's a whole host of things that can happen as you meditate and as you become more relaxed, as the body either releases tension or aligns itself. And sometimes it's muscular, sometimes it's connective tissue, sometimes, it could be anything really. It could be a subtle flow of prana, although usually the real experience of subtle flows of prana, they're just described how you're talking about it. It's like an internal sensation, and it's like a field moving rather than an actual part of a physical structure of your body moving. But what Roy had said, when people would ask questions about this, they thought they were spontaneous kriyas. Okay, maybe they are. But what he said, and what I found very helpful, was anytime you're meditating and these things start to happen, just relax more. Just feel the area and make sure you're still sitting upright, and just try to settle into the body with strength, but with relaxation. So you're upright, yet relaxed. And let the breath become a little deeper as it's as if you're sinking through the experience. Because just like random thoughts can come in, well, random body sensations can come in too. They're just something that you're learning to let go of and sink through. All right. And if they become persistent, go talk to a physical therapist, a massage therapist, a doctor, someone who knows about somatic things like that. And maybe there's something they can do. I went to a osteopathic doctor. I had done craniosacral therapy, and he was a young guy compared to me, and he kind of knew about it. And I'm trying to explain to him, I know what he's talking about, but then I decided, you know what, Ryan, just shut up. Just let him talk all he wants and just let him do his thing. And so he was telling me all this stuff, and I'm just listening. And I know what he's doing, and I can feel what he's doing. I just let him do it. And even though he didn't have the awareness that I did about what was going on, his technique and his approach worked great. So sometimes it can be helpful to get assistance in that if it's a persistent thing that gets in the way of your meditation. All right, final question in this theme. So I have been contemplating what it means to be fully awake. Me too. How does one know what the end goal is? What is fully awake? Okay, let me read that again. I have been contemplating what it means to be fully awake. How does one know what the end goal is? What is fully awake? Okay. So again, this is something that you have to figure out for yourself in a way, but you also have to trust or find an authority or someone who's experienced it that you can trust, and you might have to take their word for it at first. Sri Yukteswar, he discusses how it is the knowledge of creation, of life, of dissolution. And once that knowledge is clear within us, then we can experience a transcendence of Maya and abide in Kaivalya, oneness seen. And Patanjali talks about this in the Yoga Sutras. His end goal is Kaivalya, which loosely translates, maybe it's not so loose, but the aloneness of seeing. Okay. Well, that's what it means to be fully awake, to experience the aloneness of seeing. Well, great. What the hell does that mean? I mean, I remember the first time I read that in the Yoga Sutras, the aloneness of seeing. I was 19. Okay, so that's what I'm shooting for, the aloneness of seeing. Well, I had no idea what the aloneness of seeing was. I barely still know what it is. But when you have a source, and it's a trusted source, you hold that like a beacon. And you might not know exactly what it means, but if you have a trusted source and you're devoted to that source and you can follow it, you're willing to figure it out. You're willing to have a direct experience of, oh, okay, so I've done this and this is what happened. I have a little more clarity. Is that exactly it? No, not quite, but I keep going. And so when we think about what is the end goal and what does it mean to be fully awake, you can listen to people talk about it all day long. You can imagine what it would be like to sit in the presence of Ramana Maharshi and have him gaze at you, and liberation occurs. You can imagine that a lot. But the beautiful thing is you need to imagine it. That's part of the process. We, as a human being, remember, with Sri Yukteswar, we talked about these stages of development of the field of consciousness. Well, one of the beautiful things about a human being is that they have a capacity for abstract imagination. And it is that capacity for abstract imagination which kind of welcomes you into the experience. You have to imagine, what is it like? And of course, it might not be what you imagine it to be like, but in the imagining of itself, as they say in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, truth-bearing insight dawns. So if you want to know what it means to be fully awake, you can get a definition from a teacher that is useful to you, that you can feel a sense of devotion and trust towards. And you can wonder about that. And this is a very important spiritual practice, the wondering. When you meditate and you go through the process of stabilizing the fluctuations within the mind to the best of your ability, it's never going to be perfect, especially in the beginning. You stabilize the fluctuations of emotion, you stabilize your body so that you can sit still, and you finally hit a place of stillness, as if you're out on a beach somewhere, no one else is around, and you can just hear the waves. And you don't have anything else to do except to see the waves and feel the sun and listen to the breeze. Well, in that space of openness and spaciousness, and sometimes it's helpful to imagine what I just described, then you think about, you reflect upon, you practice what's called svadhyaya, reflection on the self, knowledge that you've learned, spiritual literature, and so on. And you wonder, when you think about Paramahansa Yogananda, and he said that the ultimate goal of life is to experience direct communion with God. All right. Well, now what you have to do in this openness and this spaciousness is wonder, well, what is God really? And sometimes in the beginning, it's a thinking of what your Sunday school teacher told you God was. Like, well, I know it's not that. And then it's a wondering of what did my spiritual teacher say on retreat that God was? And this is why I really hope that when you go on retreats, you take notes because you pull it up. Oh, what was he talking about or she talking about? And then you imagine, okay, well, if I was experiencing that lightness, that buoyancy, how would I feel? And if I was experiencing a sense of omnipresence and expansion, and at first, like, well, I can't really get into that because, there's just these four walls around me. Well, of course you can't. You haven't done a very good job of practicing it yet. But then eventually you start, oh, there's like a moment where things just click. Like there's a sense of moving in all directions. And then you've had a moment where imagination rolled into a direct experience. And the difference between direct experience and imagination is when you've had a direct experience. You can imagine what an apple tastes like, but when you taste an apple, there's no thought about it. It's just bam, there it is. So you use your imagination to wonder, to flow into it. So part of your path is certainly to ask questions like, what does it mean to be fully awake? And to ask those questions of someone that you trust and that you're willing to consider what they have to say. But beyond that, that's not the end. Beyond that, it is to then wonder, what would it be like if I experienced that? What would it be like if I could feel that in my field of consciousness? And what you'll find is maybe the words that you read or were taught weren't quite exactly it. And that's usually going to be the case. But you understand what they meant. You understand what they were pointing at. I've been fortunate to have two very good teachers, living teachers that I could actually talk to and get insight from. I've been very fortunate to have those teachers where I would contemplate, what are you talking about? And then I would have the insight and I would write to them and they would write back. And even though the words weren't exactly the way I would have written it, because I had that glimpse, that flash of understanding, and they clearly did too, because there's a reason I'm going to get information from them. There's a knowing there. There's an understanding there. It's like you go beyond words in regards to how you communicate with your mentor or spiritual teacher and so on. So yes, wonder, what does it mean to be fully awake? Read spiritual literature that speaks to that. Trust your gut. Sometimes I read spiritual literature like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. Like, I think he's just more academic and nitpicking rather than had direct experience himself. In fact, I've read several commentaries on the Yoga Sutras. There's only a few that I've read where I feel, yeah, I get a pretty good sense that they're talking from experience, not just because they've read Vyasa's commentary and they've read, Bhikshu's commentary and so on. They weren't just like putting together information. They actually had grasped it. There's a feeling to it. So if you contemplate these things as the years go by, and I'm always going to specify years because the moment you start thinking that this is going to be instantaneous or in a few months or in a few weeks, you're just shooting yourself in the foot and you're not really going to go through the whole process of figuring it out. As the years go by, these insights come and they build upon themselves and they deepen and they flow through you and they permeate your mind and they permeate your heart. And then someone might ask you one day, what's it like to be fully awake? And you'll chuckle because you'll think about the last 30 years and all the steps it took to come to where you are now. And you realize you can't even explain what you were realizing 5 years ago. But what you can do is you can say, well, here's what I did. And here's what you can do too that will give you that direct knowledge, that direct experience. So I can't at this time, and I doubt I ever will be able to tell you what it means to be fully awake. But I can say from the Yoga Sutras, it means to experience the aloneness of seeing. It means to recognize that you are infinite, eternal, pure being, undefined by the transient forms of nature. That's as close as I can get. And you have to interpret that the way you want. Paramahansa Yogananda would say it's communion, union with God. Maybe that's more meaningful for you. The Buddhists say that what? It's like nirvana, the snuffing out of whatever you snuff out when you experience nirvana. So find your beacon and start walking towards it, and find a path. Hopefully, you already found one, but find a path, find a guide that can help you navigate that, knowing that you still have to walk it yourself. All right. So we'll take a moment to see if there are any follow-up questions around this theme, things that have come up for you that I can help you more practically apply what this information is useful for. Otherwise, I'll finish up with the final question, which has been emailed to me, which is, when you do alternate nostril breathing, are you visualizing energy flows? And if so, can you describe them? So I'm going to pause here for a moment, drink some tea, and if no one responds in about 90 seconds, I'll move on. Okay, so one more question has been sent to me. Pull it back up here. So feelings are sometimes deceiving. Even if we feel short-term excitement and enjoyment about something, that may still be a wrong direction to pursue. How to navigate this? Very good. Yes, feelings are sometimes deceiving in that way. But the more you practice yoga, meditation, and the more detachment you get, that's probably the best way I can say it. I don't mean it in the sense of not being engaged in life. More perspective might be more perspective develops. Imagine interacting with a teenager, and imagine interacting with someone who's 60 years old. And the teenager wants to go on vacation, and so does the 60-year-old. Well, when a teenager wants to go on vacation, what are they paying attention to? Their hormones, all this excitement. They're paying attention to like all the stuff that's going on in their body. What's the 60-year-old paying attention to? Sure, he's going to feel what's going on in the body, but he's stepping back and he's analyzing the situation. So when it comes to your feelings, it really depends on where you are. And it's important that the feeling that you're paying attention to is not the initial electricity within the body. It's more of a observing the inner field, the inner field of guidance, and inner field of truth for the best way I can. That's the best way I can put it. Someone also asked a question about what about channeling sexual energy and brahmacharya and so on. Well, that brings up a good point. I mean, as a human being, if we just followed our hormones and our animalistic tendencies, which most people do, there'd be lots of infidelity and bastard kids all over the place, which there are. But that's for that reason of all you are doing is feeling the body. Whereas when you realize you're not your body, you can be in a loving, healthy relationship. And yes, you can admit, oh, I see someone who's attractive, but you don't let your hormones and you don't let your animalistic impulses overrun you. You know that that's just part of being human. And you deep down feel inside, but I'm absolutely loving and devoted to my partner and my spouse. And that is a more important guide for you. So ultimately, when it comes to the idea of feeling, you can have joy, you can have feelings, you can have enthusiasm, but you want to have more perspective on it. And that just comes from basically living life, practicing meditation, and becoming as psychologically and mentally and emotionally healthy as you can be. So there's no easy question for that. All right. Well, good. Well, thank you all for being here to take the time to explore this. I hope it was helpful for you. Before I get to the final question, I do want to remind you, if you don't know this already, that we talked a lot about purpose. See, I wrote this in my notes to make sure we discussed it. We talked a lot about purpose, and there's a class, the Finding Your Divine Purpose class, which is it's sandwiched in the Kriya Yoga Discipleship program on Teachable, kriya-yoga.teachable.com. It's a 4-week class, very helpful. So there's that, which can help you go into this in more detail. But because we are in December and the new year is coming up, on the Kriya Yoga podcast, if you go to the Kriya Yoga podcast, I think it's kriyayoga.podbean.com, or just Google the Kriya Yoga podcast and my name. We find that. And if you go to episodes 86, 87, and 88, that's a three-part series on spiritual intention setting for the new year, which goes into a lot of these things. So I want to encourage you. The time is coming for the holidays. You're going to have hopefully more time to yourself if you can. And the new year is coming. It's very important to set your intentions and to think about all of these things, because it defines what happens in the next year. And I do this all the time. You'll hear it in the podcasts. The final week of the year, I'll spend time reflecting, and I write out everything I think I want to accomplish for next year. And I sit and I don't just make things up that I think will be neat. I actually stop and I wonder, okay, what's the next part of life? Based on what I have done, what my service is, what I know, what do I need to do? Do I need to work more in a particular direction? Do I need to back off on things? Do I need to take care of my health better? Do I need to engage my emotions with my relationships better? Do I need to increase my education somehow? I look at all kinds of things, even from, do I need to practice my guitar more? I think about it all. Do I need to work on the house more? I take time and I reflect upon all that. And then the things that kind of stand out to me after I've written it all down, the things that kind of glow, it's as if I look at the paper and there's a feeling of, oh, these just lift up off the paper into my awareness. Well, I write those down as important things to focus on for the new year. And having done this for many years, what I find is that it immediately shifts. It makes my focus come to a point to where as soon as the new year starts, I'm enthusiastic. I want to start doing those things. And most of the time when I do them, when I write these things out, I actually finish them up by March or April. So I now I have to think more long-term in order to make the most of it. But that comes from practice, and it's worth doing. So look at episodes 86, 87, and 88 of the Kriya Yoga podcast. Now, the final question for today, the encore question. When you do alternate nostril breathing, are you visualizing energy flows? If so, can you describe them? I thought that the practice was to pull energy up one side and push it down the other, and then reverse the process. But it sounds like in some traditions, they draw energy up on the inhales and expel negativity or impurities on the exhales. Okay, well, I can't speak to some traditions, but I can tell you what I do. Mostly what I do is I just breathe. I just go through the process of inhaling through one nostril and exhaling through the other, and so on. I do it steadily with a slight pause in between the inhale and the exhale. And the focus is on, for me, the focus is on feeling, like if I inhale through the left nostril, the coolness of the air into the nostril and even up into the sinuses, which you learn to feel in time. And then when I exhale, there's a focus on feeling the warmth of the air moving through the sinuses and out through the nostrils. So when I do it, mainly all I'm doing is breathing in, breathing out, switching nostrils as you go for Nadi Shodhana. And I'm focusing really intently on the feeling of coolness of air moving in through the nostrils into the sinuses, and then moving out, the warmth moving out, and then reversing, cool in, warmth out, and so on. One thing I have done a lot in the past with this is when I inhale, I I feel that side of the body. So, for example, if I'm inhaling through the left side, my attention is simply on becoming aware of the left side of my body. It's like my inner scanner is scanning what does the whole left side of my body feel like. And then when I exhale, then I just scan the right side of the body. I try to feel it as deeply and as intently as I can. I inhale and I still feel that side of the body. So I keep just shifting wherever the inhale or the exhale is, my attention is on that side of the body. So you can do it that way. You can do it just feeling the sensation in the nostrils beyond where are the energy movies, where is the energy moving, and so on. I'm sure there's multiple ways of looking at that, and that's not. I don't worry about that. There was one more thing I wanted to say about that. Oh, the beautiful thing about alternate nostril breathing, and we've talked a little bit about counseling, is that when you focus on one side of the body and another side of the body, and you keep going back and forth, this is switching, it's activating one side of the brain and the nervous system and another side of the brain, the nervous system. And as you go back and forth and do this by feeling one side then the other side, I believe they call that bilateral stimulation. And that can lead to greater coherence of information between the hemispheres of the brain, which tends to lead to a better meditation experience. So even if all you're doing is sitting there for 12 rounds or 24 rounds, feeling deeply in the way I've described, that is having a very profound effect on your nervous system, which will allow you to process consciousness, hopefully better. All right. So we'll conclude here. And just like we started, if we can take just a few minutes to do a little meditative prayer. So closing the eyes, sitting up straight and feeling the body. So we've spent this time contemplating the theme of divine purpose, of the purpose of our lives, the purpose of enlightenment and what enlightenment is. Just let your breath be natural and stabilized as if the information, the knowledge, that which you needed is permeating, becoming settled, even becoming active and alive within your mind and your heart and your body. You might not know it or how it's doing so just yet, but it's settling in. And in your mind, feel, and in your heart, feel as though the knowledge you need to continue to understand and to grow is available to you. Even if you don't know it yet, it's in there and you can feel it, the energy of it, the quality of it, the fullness of it. And as the days and weeks go by and as we move into the new year, here and there it becomes apparent to you, either in your daily life or in flashes of insight and meditation. Feel as though it's possible. And then once again, we are practicing together. We are together in this online question and answer session. So imagine that you can sense all the people who are listening, participating as though they're points of light around you. And with a sense of joy and happiness for them, that they also are learning and growing, that they can also perceive the purpose of their life, the experience of spiritual awareness and wisdom, as though we are all together in this wave of energy, and that we are all supporting each other with this intention of possibility and growth. Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor mahamritam gamaya. Lead me from ignorance to truth, lead me from darkness to light, lead me from death to immortality. May this be true of all beings everywhere. Om Shanti, peace.